Lila Parker was the girl everyone adored, kind, bright, and full of promise. Eli Harris was the boy no one really noticed, quiet, distant, always watching. They lived just steps apart on the same peaceful street, but one of them was hiding a dark obsession that would turn their neighborhood into a crime scene and their story into a chilling mystery no one saw coming. Maple Hollow was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to feel safe. The streets were clean, the houses neatly spaced with trimmed hedges and flower beds out front. Neighbors waved as they passed, and children played in the cul-de-sacs without fear. It was a town where people didn't lock their doors until bedtime, and even then some didn't bother. Crime was a thing that happened somewhere else, on the news, in distant cities, but not here, not in Maple Hollow. The Parker family lived in a cozy two-story house on Willow Street, near the end of a quiet lane. They were friendly and well-liked, the kind of family everyone trusted. Mr. Parker coached youth soccer and Mrs. Parker volunteered at the elementary school. Their daughter, Lila, was 17 and known for her kindness. She walked dogs for the elderly and tutored younger kids after school. Everyone liked Lila. She was the kind of girl who made people smile just by being around. Across the street, from them lived the Harris family. Not many people knew them well. Mrs. Harris was quiet, often seen coming home from her job at the local clinic. She had a son, Eli, who mostly kept to himself. He didn't go to many school events or hang out with the other kids. He was thin, pale, and always wore a hoodie, even in the summer. Most people assumed he was just shy or maybe a little odd, but harmless. Eli spent most of his time indoors, usually upstairs in his room. Sometimes people would see him looking out his window, watching the world go by, watching people, watching Lila. No one thought much of it. It was a Thursday morning in early October when everything changed. Mrs. Parker went to wake Lila for school, but her room was empty. Her bed had been slept in, but she was gone. The window was open, and the screen had been pushed out. Her phone, school books, and backpack were still on the desk. At first, her parents thought she might have gone for a walk. Maybe she needed air. But when she didn't return by lunchtime, panic set in. Police were called, and soon the whole street was swarming with officers, dogs, and flashing lights. Flyers with Lila's face were printed and posted around town. Volunteers organized search parties. People walked through the woods, checked under porches, and called her name until their voices went hoarse. But nothing turned up. No signs of a struggle, no footprints, no clues. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. People began locking their doors in Maple Hollow. Parents stopped letting their children walk to school. Fear crept in like a cold fog. Whispers started. Maybe she ran away. Maybe she was taken. Maybe it was someone from outside town. But no one wanted to consider the possibility that it could have been someone close, someone they knew, someone they trusted. And all the while, Eli Harris watched from his window, silent and still. As the days turned into weeks, the panic that had gripped Maple Hollow began to settle into something darker, suspicion. Whispers echoed at grocery stores and over backyard fences. Everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. Lila Parker was still missing, and the fear of the unknown had settled deep into the town's bones. The police widened their search, bringing in outside help and reviewing surveillance footage from every camera in the area. A delivery driver who had been on the street that night became the center of attention. He had a criminal record, minor theft, and a past accusation that never went to court. The town latched on to the idea that he was guilty. It felt easier than considering the alternative that someone from Maple Hollow had done it. Investigators followed the lead, questioned the driver, and combed through his alibi. At first, it seemed solid, until they realized the timeline didn't add up. Traffic cameras showed he never turned onto Willow Street that night. He hadn't even been in the neighborhood. The lead dissolved. The fear didn't. Eli Harris continued to live quietly across the street from the Parkers. People barely noticed him. He walked to school like usual, kept his head down, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. The police had interviewed him briefly. Early on, he told them he had been home that night playing an online game. He said he hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. The login records from the game confirmed his story. No one pushed further. What they didn't know was that Eli had made sure his story matched the evidence. He had set up a program to mimic online activity, making it appear as if he was active for hours while he was nowhere near his computer. It was simple, clever, and invisible to anyone who wasn't looking closely. And no one was looking closely at Eli. As the investigation stalled, Eli became more involved in the community efforts to find Lila. He joined search parties, flashlight in hand, walking through the same woods he already knew too well. He sat silently at vigils, watching Lila's parents cry in the front row. He passed out missing posters, even stapling one to a telephone pole at the end of his own street. It was a performance, and no one saw through it. What made it so chilling was how ordinary he looked. To most, he was still the quiet boy with the tired eyes and shy posture. The boy who kept to himself. The boy who lived with his single mother and never caused trouble. The kind of person no one suspected. Lila's parents, broken and exhausted, tried to hold on to hope. They left the porch light on every night, just in case she came home. Her room stayed exactly as it was, the open window untouched. Across the street, Eli continued watching. Every night, lights off, curtains slightly parted, eyes fixed on the Parker house. He didn't look away, not once. 3 months had passed since Lila disappeared, and Maple Hollow had begun to wear the weight of her absence like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Halloween came and went with barely a decoration. Parents clutched their children's hands a little tighter, and even the most cheerful street seemed dimmer. The case had gone cold, but the town's unease had only deepened. Then a tip came in. Anonymous. A shaky voice on the line told police to search the storm drain on the edge of the woods, far from the neighborhood, in a place forgotten by time. Officers responded, not expecting much, but what they found changed everything. The storm shelter had long been abandoned, rusted at the hinges and hidden beneath overgrown brush. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and silence, but the discovery was unmistakable. Chains bolted into the concrete wall, a mattress rotting on the floor, and a single folding chair facing a camera on a tripod. The footage found in the camera was worse than anything anyone imagined. There were videos, 8 of them. One recorded every week. Lila was in all of them. Her eyes were wide with fear, her voice barely audible. She sat in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, sometimes crying, sometimes silent. In the early ones, she spoke. She pleaded for help, asked where her parents were. Then she stopped talking altogether. The last video was different. She looked into the lens and whispered something, just 2 words. The text enhanced the audio, filtering out static and noise. Finally, they heard it. He watches. Investigators took those words seriously. The FBI joined the case, bringing in profilers and forensic specialists. Whoever had done this was organized, patient, and deliberate. The room was sterile. No fingerprints, no DNA. The camera had been wiped clean. It was as if the person behind it had erased themselves from the scene. Still there were patterns, the time between recordings, the consistent lighting, the items in the shelter. Whoever was responsible had returned regularly, and they knew what they were doing. The town braced for another shock, but none came. There were no new videos, no ransom demands, just silence, so the investigation turned back to the beginning. The neighborhood, the people who were there the night Lila disappeared. Everyone was re-interviewed, but this time with more intensity, more suspicion. And when agents reviewed statements and timelines again, one name stood out: Eli Harris. Eli's alibi was solid, but now it felt too perfect. His game logs had no gaps, but a digital forensics expert spotted something odd. The activity pattern didn't match a human user. A script had been running, mimicking real-time play. It was artificial, manufactured. With that discovery, attention shifted sharply. Agents knocked on the Harris door with a search warrant in hand. Mrs. Harris let them in, confused and tired. Eli stood at the top of the stairs, silent, watching. The officers moved quickly, combing through the house, room by room. Then they climbed to the attic. There, in the dim space beneath the sloped ceiling, was a locked trunk. They pried it open. What they found would unravel the boy across the street. Inside the trunk were things that should never have been there, things that had once belonged to Lila Parker. A silver necklace with a small heart charm, identical to the one she always wore in school photos, a pair of worn ballet flats, neatly placed side by side, a folded flyer from the first search party, with her face printed in bold letters across the front. But even more unsettling was what lay beneath those items, a spiral-bound notebook filled with page after page of handwritten notes. Every entry detailed Lila's movements in eerie precision. Times she left the house for school, which route she took, how long she stayed at her after-school job, what she wore on particular days, who she spoke to, even the briefest conversations. It wasn't just a diary, it was surveillance. The pages stretched back nearly 6 months. Tucked into the back of the notebook were drawings. At first, they looked like rough sketches of people, but a closer look revealed the truth. They were all the same girl, trapped in cages, behind windows, in chains. One showed her inside a small room with a single chair and a camera in the corner. The similarities to the storm shelter footage were undeniable. The drawings weren't just disturbing, they were confessions. Eli's computer was taken into evidence. Forensics experts dug into his files, bypassing deleted folders and hidden partitions. They uncovered programs used to simulate game activity, proving Eli had fabricated his alibi. There were also hundreds of images, photos taken from a distance, through windows, in public spaces, every one of Lila. He had been watching her for over a year. News of the discovery spread quickly. Maple Hollow, once so sure of its safety, found itself reeling. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, stunned, whispering among themselves. The boy who lived across from the Parkers, the quiet kid they'd all ignored, was suddenly the center of a nightmare. Some said they'd always thought something was off about him. Others admitted they'd never paid him much attention at all. Eli was arrested that night. He didn't resist. He didn't say a word. He walked out of the house in handcuffs, head down, as the flashing lights of patrol cars lit up the street. Reporters soon followed, crowding the front lawn, desperate for a statement. But the authorities kept their findings sealed while they searched for Lila herself. They had proof Eli had watched her, proof he had studied her. But they still didn't know what he had done with her. The Harris home became a ghost on the street. Windows, covered, yellow tape across the porch. The Parkers, overwhelmed with grief and rage, moved into a relative's home across town. They couldn't bear to look out their window and see where Eli had once stood. Even with so much evidence, the one question no one could answer remained the most important of all. Where was Lila Parker? And then, by chance and memory, the final piece of the puzzle emerged from someone no one expected. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Lila's younger brother Max sat at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album. The Parker family had moved in with relatives after Eli's arrest, trying to piece together what was left of their lives. Max, only 12, hadn't said much during the investigation. He didn't understand everything that had happened, but he missed his sister. He looked at every photo of her like it might bring her back. Then he paused on a picture from years earlier. Lila and Max sitting in a treehouse deep in the woods behind their grandfather's old cabin. The treehouse hadn't been used in years. Their grandfather had passed away, and the cabin was now abandoned. But Max remembered something. A hatch in the floor of the treehouse, small and barely noticeable. He had crawled into it once as a game, thinking it was a secret clubhouse. When he mentioned it to his mother, she froze. Authorities were called immediately. They followed Max's directions, hiking deep into the woods where the treehouse stood, rotting beneath the weight of time and overgrowth. It was barely visible, hidden by pine and brush. The wooden steps up to it creaked under their boots. Inside, the air was musty and cold. Dust floated in beams of sunlight slipping through the cracks in the wood. Then they found it, the hatch, half covered by a torn rug. They pulled it open. Beneath it was a narrow bunker built into the earth. The space was small, barely tall enough to stand. Inside was a thin mattress, a pile of empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a worn blanket. And there, curled in the corner, was Lila Parker. She was alive, barely conscious, thin and dehydrated, but breathing. She looked up at the light, blinking against it, unsure if what she saw was real. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. She had been living in that hidden space for weeks. After escaping the storm shelter, she had fled into the woods, terrified Eli would find her again. She didn't know if he had been arrested. She didn't know anyone was still looking. All she knew was she had to hide. Lila told investigators she had managed to slip her restraints one night while Eli was distracted. She had run through the forest, barefoot and bleeding, until she found the treehouse, the last place she had ever felt safe. She had no phone, no supplies. She survived on rainwater and whatever she could scavenge from abandoned campsites. She had stayed quiet, afraid the wrong person might find her first. News of her survival spread like wildfire. For the first time in months, the town of Maple Hollow exhaled. The girl they feared was lost forever had come home. But nothing would ever be the same. Eli Harris was sentenced to life without parole. In court, he showed no emotion, no apology, no explanation. He never said a word. Maple Hollow still stands. The houses are still there, and the children still play. But the windows now have locks. Curtains are drawn earlier, and no one forgets what happened. Not because of what Eli did, but because of what no one saw. The quiet boy, the harmless neighbor, the one who lived across the street.